My name is Kim Kirkwood. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I came to Butte County by way of Missouri. It's been 10 years there in the Midwest while I pursued my education and started my first job in education. And so now I am here in Chico, California, a new environment. Glad to be back in California, and it is what it is right now. My earliest memories about being a person of color growing up in Los Angeles, there was an introductory of voluntary busing, and they were busing kids from the from the urban area into the suburban San Fernando Valley. And I think my very first thought of it was getting ready to be bused. My mom sat me down and had the talk. And the talk pretty much was, hey, look, you're going to be the only black person that some of these folks will ever get to meet. So you make sure that you go there and you're on your best behavior. So I think I was in the middle school, and it was carrying the weight of knowing I had this responsibility to represent my race. Going there knowing that whatever perceptions that people had about black people, I was either going to confirm it or dispel it. And so that was nothing at the time that I thought a lot about. It became something afterwards as an adult. I remember going into the San Fernando Valley and feeling like I had to acclimate to the Valley talk, to be more accepted, so I didn't sound like I was from the hood. And just going there and being the only one black kid in each class that I went to, not seeing any more teachers of color where I was there. So it was a bit of an adjustment. I think the awareness came afterwards. Just growing up and knowing that I went to Valley and I changed so much of me to fit in. When I came back to my neighborhood, then I stood out. I stood out as being whitewashed, so to speak. Like, oh, you changed the way you talk. You're changing the way you act. And just always feeling like in the environment, I had to adjust and adapt so that I fit in, so that I didn't become the stereotype that people thought of when it came to what black people are or how they act or how they talk. I went to a junior high school in the San Fernando Valley. I had befriended a couple of Caucasian kids, and we were just cool hanging out. And they lived really close to school, so they would go home for lunch. And I remember going home to lunch with a friend one time, and her mom came in, and then she called her to the back and she said, "Get that black girl out of here." And I just remember it was the walk to school, even though we were probably about 2 or 3 houses from the school, it felt like a very long walk. It really, to some degree, felt like the walk of shame. Just wondering, why would she say that? And not really being conscious that she's white, I'm black. I was just like, she's my friend. But for an adult to highlight that as a reason to have this child out of my house was, I would say, my first experience of realizing that. When you go out and you notice that you're the only black person in the room, you're the only person of color in the room, and knowing and feeling like, wow, all eyes are on me. Maybe people are expecting me to be the angry black woman. Maybe people are expecting me to be loud. And really fighting hard to not be those stereotypes. I think that was the one thing that I've always carried in every community, especially a little bit about me living in the Midwest. Being from Los Angeles, California, there's just a lot of stuff that goes along with that when you say you're from California. And going and feeling like these people don't know who I am, and when I interact with them, the perception, I think, is like, are all black people like this? And so I was always super conscious. I've always kind of wear this weight of being conscious of how I act, not really just being me, because I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want people to think any less of me. I didn't want them to think that, and this is a loose term that we use, I didn't want people to think I was ghetto, or that I wasn't educated. And so always feeling that pressure to kind of rise up to this unknown standard of people that are around you, looking at you, not knowing you, but possibly judging you. I kind of feel like there's like this You know, it's like when kids grow up and they're getting ready to go through puberty, and we have that talk about hormones and feelings and, you know, being attracted to whomever we are. I feel like that's a talk, kind of the race talk that we have with our children. And I think I have it with my son because my parents had it with me. I was in middle school and my parents sat me down and they said, hey, look, you're probably going to be the only black person that some white people ever experience. And so you got to do this and you got to do that. And then there's this long laundry list of expectations that I have to live up to. And not even having the maturity and the capacity to really comprehend that. And unfortunately, I've gone that route with my son. I mean, and the story starts off typically, you're going to be a grown black man one day, and people are going to expect this. And I've created this undue pressure for him to be super self-conscious of who he is, not as a person, but as a black person, as a person of color. I do think the racism is still a thing. I think we want to believe that it's not. I think we want to believe that we're past it, that we're not in the 60s, that we're not in the 40s. But racism is embedded. We know about slavery. We've heard about it. We've seen the systemic racism and the oppression that black people in their communities have experienced. But now that we're all grown up and it's not as visual, no one wants to talk about it. And I think that that is the problem. I think that the problem is that we don't talk about it. We don't think it's us. We don't think it's our generation. As an adult, I think when you're aspiring to better and you see someone who has accomplished that, then it gives you hope. When I was in high school, I did have one teacher. It was the only African-American teacher that I've ever encountered in school. And I may have been in around the 11th or 12th grade. And Mr. Saxon, I remember him acknowledging my name. Like, he just was like, hey, Kim, good morning, when I would walk into class. And that, I didn't have teachers do that. It was just you come in, you sit down, and they do roll call, and we had to get into the work. And I felt like he took the time just to say hi, you know, acknowledge that I walked in the room. And it meant something to me. It made me feel like, oh, he sees me. My response to being colorblind, I don't know if this is a real word, but I think it's foolery. Because we do see each other. That's the uniqueness of us individually, is that we are very different. And so for someone to say, I don't see color, maybe the intent is that I don't treat you differently because of your color. But we can't not acknowledge that this person is African American and they're Hispanic and this person is Latinx or this person is Asian. We can't deny that we don't see those things. And so to some degree, I think that when people say that, they use it as something to hide behind so that they're not dealing with the real problem, you know. And the real problem is that we have a way of thinking in our nation. There's a way that we respond and react. Even in the black community, there's a divide there with certain black people being of a certain tone. And the whole story that comes behind it, we don't know it, but we've heard it through slavery. That was the house slave, you know, the bastard child of the plantation man, owner. And so they're lighter skinned, and so they are better. And so we have this separation and divide even in our own community. And I think to some degree, it's just acknowledging that it exists, you know, and I think that that is the problem. When we don't acknowledge something exists, we never really get over it. We don't get past it. My experience as a black woman in Butte County are probably just the weight of what I've grown up with. Knowing that there's not a lot of representation of African Americans in the community, there's not a moment that I don't walk out the door that I'm thinking, you know, this person's looking at me and I'm like this black person, like I feel like I represent my race. You know what I mean? So if a situation at a restaurant where I'm maybe frustrated and I'm trying to get the attention of the manager, I'm very conscious of how I react. You know, should I not say anything? Maybe I should just get out and walk. I mean, they're probably going to, and it's these things, this dialogue in the back of my head Maybe they're going to think I'm the angry black woman if I complain that the waiter keeps walking by and never came to me. And I think that those are things that, for me personally, that I have to overcome. I do go into situations where I think some people may have those perceptions. You know, when the conversation comes up about education and people are like, oh, you have a degree, you know, as if the expectation is that you wouldn't, you know what I mean? Or I've had people just say, you're so articulate. And I go, okay. You know, I mean, I didn't know that that would be a normal compliment. But I think it is as if you have the expectation that someone would be a little less. The lesser than expectations come from the perception that the world has about black people as a whole. Just the force of media, if I could just start there. The lack of representation in television and film, or when we do see something, it is that violent person or that person being arrested or that person on drugs or, you know, the imagery that unfortunately the music industry personifies, you know. And so people carry that around. That may be their only experience or exposure of a black person. And so they carry that as that's how they are. And so I think that those are the things, the misfortunate things that help shape perception. What I would want people who are not African American to know and understand about being a black woman, being in a black family, there are stereotypes, but we do not all fit the stereotype. And that if you were to meet me as who I am, as who I reflect myself to be, not by the preconceived notions or the misguided information or the social and media influences of who you think black people are, because it doesn't give me a chance. It doesn't give me a chance to be who I am. It doesn't allow you the opportunity to see me as a person first versus a person of color. And I think that that is the one most important thing for me is let me be me. I am a complete and a whole person, regardless of how people may perceive the race of black people. And just knowing that I walk out into the world and I don't see limits. I don't see the boundaries. I don't see the restrictions. I just see opportunity, and you know, and I just muster up enough motivation and just go after it. No matter what people perceive you to be, you always have the opportunity to prove them wrong. I mean, and that may be a part of what drives me. It's because I don't want to be that stereotype. I want you to know there is better that comes out of the African American community. I think we all have work to do. You know, like I said about the things I carry from my childhood, that pressure of when I go into an environment, like, are they looking at me as a black woman? You know what I mean? And just being self-conscious or super self-conscious of like my behavior. Oh, I better not laugh too loud. Oh, I better not complain about anything. I have work to do too. We all got our backpack of life with our junk in it. And I think it's just time we just start unloading some of our junk. You know, it's like a junk drawer. There's some stuff in there you don't even need. You don't even know what it is. You know, and if we start cleaning out, then we start making room for what's really happening. What are the changes that we need to do individually? Why can't we all just get to a level of, hey, we need a change? And that means if I'm going to change, I'm going to have to do some soul searching. I'm going to have to do some reflection. Look in the mirror and see, is there anything about the way I do things or the way I perceive things that may need to change, and really go after it? Because I think that's how real change happens. It starts right here.